Before the peacemaker made every cowboy feel invincible, before the Remington became a lawman's best friend, there was one revolver that changed everything about how men fought and died on the frontier. The Colt Navy 1851 wasn't just another six-shooter. It was the gun that taught a generation of gunfighters that speed, balance, and devastating power could fit in your waistband. And if you were staring down its octagonal barrel in a dusty street, well, folks, you better make peace with your maker real quick. Chapter 1. Birth of a Legend. Samuel Colt had already made a name for himself by the time 1851 rolled around. His 1836 Patterson revolver was innovative, but had some serious problems, mainly that it was fragile and complicated to reload. Then came the Walker Colt in 1846, which was basically a hand cannon that weighed 4.5 pounds loaded. Great for mounted cavalry, terrible for everything else. Colt needed something in between, something practical that a man could actually carry all day without getting a hernia. In 1850, he introduced two revolvers at almost the same time, the 1851 Navy and the 1849 pocket model. Now, here's where it gets a little confusing for folks, so pay attention. The Navy wasn't called that because the Navy bought a bunch of them, although they did. It got the name because the cylinder had an engraving of the Battle of Campeche Bay, a naval engagement from 1843, where the Republic of Texas Navy defeated Mexican ships. Samuel Colt was nothing if not a marketing genius, and he knew that patriotic imagery sold guns. The Navy was chambered for .36 caliber, which seems small compared to the .44 and .45 caliber rounds we associate with the Old West. But here's the thing, black powder revolvers work differently than cartridge guns. That .36 caliber ball, backed by a healthy charge of black powder, was absolutely devastating at close range. We're talking about speeds of around 800 to 1,000 feet per second, which is plenty enough to punch through bone and vital organs. The gun weighed about 2 pounds 13 ounces with a 7.5-inch barrel, though shorter barrels were available. It had a brass trigger guard and backstrap, case-hardened frame, and a blued steel barrel. The grip frame was smaller than the Dragoon models that came before it, making it much more manageable for the average person. And this is key. It actually fit in a holster that you could wear comfortably. The Dragoon revolvers were so big you practically needed a saddle scabbard. Production started in 1851 at Colt's factory in Hartford, Connecticut, and they made them right up until 1873, when cartridge revolvers made percussion guns obsolete. During that 22-year run, Colt manufactured approximately 215,000 Navy revolvers. That's a lot of six-shooters, and they went everywhere. Europe, Asia, South America, and of course all across the American frontier. Now, you might be wondering why Colt stuck with .36 caliber when bigger was supposedly better. The answer is pretty simple. The Navy gave you 6 reliable shots in a package that was easy to carry and quick to point. The recoil was manageable, which meant you could actually hit what you were shooting at under stress. And unlike the big Walker Colts that could knock you backwards when they went off, the Navy let you stay in the fight and keep shooting accurately. Chapter 2. How the Navy actually works. Alright, so how does this percussion revolver actually function? Well, it's not as simple as loading cartridges like you would in a peacemaker. This is old school black powder technology, and it requires a bit of know-how. First, you'd cock the hammer, which rotates the cylinder and aligns a chamber with the barrel. Then you'd pour black powder, usually about 18 to 25 grains, into the chamber. Next, you'd place a lead ball, which was slightly oversized at about 375 thousandths of an inch, over the mouth of the chamber. Using the loading lever mounted under the barrel, you'd ram that ball down into the chamber, shearing off a little ring of lead in the process. That ring of lead is important because it creates a seal. After loading all 6 chambers, you'd place a percussion cap on each nipple at the back of the cylinder. These caps contained fulminate of mercury, which, when struck by the hammer, would create a spark that traveled through a channel and ignited the main powder charge. Boom, you've got ignition. Now here's something Hollywood never shows you. Smart shooters would put grease over the top of each loaded chamber to prevent what's called a chain fire. That's when the flash from one chamber ignites powder in an adjacent chamber. And suddenly you've got 2 or 3 chambers going off at once. This could blow up the gun and take your hand with it. So yeah, a little beef tallow or beeswax could save your life. The Navy was a single-action design, meaning you had to manually cock the hammer for each shot. Some folks try to tell you that gunfighters fan their navies like you see in the movies, but that's mostly nonsense. Fanning could work in a pinch, but it tore up the mechanism and your accuracy went straight to hell. Real gunfighters cocked and aimed. One advantage the percussion system had over cartridges was that you could adjust your load. Need more punch? Add more powder. Want less recoil for target practice? Use less powder. This customization was appealing to a lot of shooters who knew their business. The sights on the Navy were pretty basic. A brass post up front and a hammer notch in the back. They weren't adjustable and they weren't fancy, but they worked well enough for the distances most gunfights happened at. And let's be honest, when someone's shooting back at you, you're not worried about fine sight alignment anyway. Chapter 3: Military Service and Probing Ground. The Colt Navy saw more military action than just about any handgun of its era. During the 1850s, both Army and Navy personnel purchased them privately since government-issue sidearms were scarce. By the time the Civil War kicked off in 1861, the Navy had proven itself reliable enough that both Union and Confederate forces wanted as many as they could get. The U.S. Navy bought around 10,000 navies during the war. The Army bought even more. Confederate officers, who often had to purchase their own sidearms, favored the Navy for its balance and reliability. Jefferson Davis himself carried a pair. J.E.B. Stuart, the legendary Confederate cavalry commander, carried navies. These weren't desk officers, folks. These were men whose lives depended on their firearms working when it counted. In naval combat, the Navy was perfect. Ship-to-ship boarding actions were close-quarters affairs, where a reliable 6-shot revolver gave you a massive advantage over single-shot pistols or cutlasses. The gun's balance made it effective even in the rolling chaos of a ship's deck in combat. On land, cavalry troopers loved the Navy because it was light enough to carry without weighing down your saddle rig, but powerful enough to stop an enemy combatant. Confederate cavalry raiders under Mosby and Quantrill carried multiple Navy revolvers, sometimes 4 or 5, because it was faster to draw a fresh gun than reload in the middle of a fight. After the Civil War, the Navy continued to see service in the Indian Wars, though by then it was being replaced by newer cartridge revolvers. Still, many veterans kept their trusty navies because they knew the gun worked. There are documented cases of Navy revolvers being carried as late as the 1880s by men who simply refused to give them up. The Mexican-American conflicts of the 1850s had also proven the Navy's worth. Texas Rangers and irregular forces used them extensively against Comanche raiders and Mexican bandits. The gun's reliability in dusty, harsh conditions made it ideal for frontier warfare. Chapter 4: The Civilian Market and What It Cost. So, what did a Navy cost if you were a civilian wanting to buy one? In the 1850s, a brand new Colt Navy would set you back around $13 to $15. Now that might not sound like much, but remember that the average laborer was making about $1 a day. So you're looking at 2 to 3 weeks' wages for a working man. That's roughly equivalent to spending $1,500 to $2,000 on a handgun today. For that price, you got the standard model with a 7.5-inch barrel, walnut grips, and that naval battle scene engraved on the cylinder. If you wanted customization, and plenty of folks did, Colt's factory could accommodate you. Nickel plating cost extra. Ivory or mother-of-pearl grips would add to the price. Some wealthy customers had their navies engraved with elaborate scroll work and inlaid with silver or gold. There were cheaper revolvers on the market. Various manufacturers made copies and knockoffs of the Colt design, some decent and some absolute junk. Remington made their 1858 Navy, which was actually a pretty good competitor, but the Colt name meant something. It meant quality and reliability, and in the rough-and-tumble world of the frontier, that was worth paying for. Gun shops in cities like San Francisco, St. Louis, and New Orleans stocked navies along with powder, balls, caps, and holsters. Traveling salesmen carried them west to supply mining camps and frontier towns. The gun became so ubiquitous that you could find ammunition and parts just about anywhere civilization reached. Used navies were common too. After the Civil War, thousands of military surplus revolvers flooded the market. You could pick up a well-used Navy for maybe $5 to $8, and if you weren't too picky about finish wear, you had yourself a functioning firearm. A lot of cowboys, prospectors, and small-town merchants armed themselves this way. Chapter 5: The 6 Truths. why gunfighters feared it. Now we get to the heart of the matter. Why did the Colt Navy 1851 terrify early gunfighters? Here are 6 truths that explain exactly why this revolver earned its fearsome reputation. Truth number 1. Balance and pointability. The Navy had something that most other revolvers of its era lacked: perfect balance. When you picked up a Navy, it felt right. The weight distribution between the barrel and the grip was damn near ideal. This meant that when you drew and pointed it, the gun naturally aligned with your target. You didn't have to think about it. Your hand, wrist, and the barrel formed a straight line that pointed exactly where you looked. In a gunfight, that fraction of a second matters. If your opponent has to adjust his aim because his gun's muzzle heavy or the grip's at the wrong angle, but you don't, you're getting your shot off first. And the first accurate shot usually decides the fight. Gunfighters understood this instinctively. They'd pick up a Navy and immediately know they had an advantage. The grip angle of the Navy was steeper than later Colt models, and some folks complain about that today. But for point shooting, which is how most gunfights went down, that steep angle actually helped. You could draw, thrust the gun forward like throwing a punch, and your shot would be on target at 7 to 10 yards without using the sights. Truth number 2. Reliability in harsh conditions. The frontier was hell on machinery. Dust, mud, rain, snow, extreme heat, extreme cold, gunpowder residue, you name it. Equipment failed constantly, and when your life depends on a mechanical device, that's a real problem. The Navy earned its reputation because it kept working when other guns quit. The design was simple compared to later revolvers. Fewer parts meant fewer things to break. The percussion system, while finicky to load, was actually pretty robust once loaded. Those caps would fire even after getting wet, something paper cartridges couldn't claim. The cylinder arbor was sturdy. The hand that rotated the cylinder was strong. The lockwork was overbuilt. Men who carried navies through campaigns in the Southwest, where dust was everywhere, reported that the gun kept functioning while fancier European revolvers seized up. Buffalo hunters, who went weeks without cleaning their guns, found that the Navy would still shoot even when caked with powder fouling. This reliability bred confidence, and confidence in a gunfight is everything. When your opponent knows your gun won't fail, that changes the dynamic. They can't hope for a misfire or a jam. They know that if you pull the trigger, that gun's going to go bang 6 times in a row, and they'd better be ready for all 6. Truth number 3, the penetration factor. Now, here's where we need to bust a Hollywood myth. Bigger isn't always better. Yes, the Navy was 36 caliber compared to 44 or 45, but that didn't make it less lethal. In fact, the Navy's penetration characteristics were downright terrifying to anyone who'd seen what it could do. That round ball backed by black powder would punch through surprisingly thick materials. Heavy wool coats, leather vests, even thin wooden doors weren't safe. The ball would penetrate and keep going, tumbling through flesh and breaking bones. The wound channels were nasty. Unlike modern jacketed bullets that punch neat holes, these lead balls deformed and created irregular wounds that were hell for frontier doctors to treat. At typical gunfight distances, 7 to 15 yards, the Navy had all the stopping power you needed. Shot placement mattered more than caliber, and the Navy's accuracy meant you could place your shots. A 36 caliber ball through the chest cavity was just as fatal as a 44 caliber ball through the chest cavity, and you had 6 tries to make that happen. There are documented cases of Navy balls penetrating multiple opponents in close quarters fights. That's not movie stuff. That actually happened. When bodies are packed close together, that ball just keeps traveling until it stops in something solid. Truth number 4, reload speed. Advantage, weight, reload speed. A percussion revolver? Hear me out on this one. Experienced shooters could reload a Navy faster than you'd think, and they had a trick that gave them an edge over single-shot pistols or even some early cartridge guns. First off, carrying spare loaded cylinders was common. You could swap out an empty cylinder for a loaded one in about 15 to 20 seconds if you knew what you were doing. That's 6 more shots faster than loading individual chambers. Some gunfighters carried 3 or 4 spare cylinders, giving them 18 to 24 rounds available in a fight. But even loading from scratch, a practice shooter could have all 6 chambers reloaded in under 2 minutes. That's not fast by modern standards, but compared to what? A single-shot pistol took nearly a minute to reload. Early cartridge guns had ejection issues. The Navy's loading lever system, once you had it down to muscle memory, was actually pretty efficient. In a running gunfight, where there are pauses in the action, those 2 minutes could mean the difference between being combat effective again or being defenseless. Gunfighters who survived multiple encounters understood this, and they practiced their loading procedure until they could do it without thinking. Truth number 5, concealability. For a gun with a 7.5-inch barrel, the Navy was surprisingly easy to conceal. The slim profile meant it could be tucked into a waistband behind your back, hidden under a coat, or carried in a shoulder rig without printing, obviously. Gamblers loved the Navy for exactly this reason. In towns where visible weapons were discouraged or outright banned, having a Navy hidden under your frock coat gave you an advantage. You looked like a respectable businessman right up until the moment you needed to defend yourself. Then suddenly, you had 6 shots of serious firepower. The shorter barrel versions, the 5-inch and even 4-inch models, were even better for concealment. You gave up a little velocity, maybe 50 to 75 feet per second, but gained the ability to hide the gun in places a longer barrel couldn't go. Shoulder holsters, belly rigs, even modified coat pockets could accommodate these shorter Navies. This concealability factor terrified opponents because you never knew who was armed. That well-dressed gentleman at the card table, he might be carrying a Navy in a shoulder holster. The quiet fellow at the end of the bar, Navy in his waistband. The element of surprise is powerful, and the Navy delivered it. Truth number 6, the psychological edge. Here's the truth that's hardest to quantify, but maybe the most important. When you pulled a Colt Navy on someone, they knew exactly what they were facing. The gun's reputation preceded it. Stories of Navy revolvers settling disputes in favor of the man who had won were common enough that everyone knew them. If you were facing down someone with a Navy and you had a single-shot pistol or a pocket gun or even an older revolver, you were already at a psychological disadvantage. You knew he had 6 shots. You knew the gun was reliable. You knew that men who carried Navies tended to know how to use them. That psychological pressure could make men back down without a shot being fired. And that was fine by most Navy carriers, because not getting shot at is even better than winning a gunfight. The threat of violence backed by a credible weapon often prevented the violence from happening at all. But when violence did happen, that psychological edge remained. Your opponent knew you had advantages. That knowledge could make them hesitate, rush their shot, or make mistakes. And mistakes in gunfights are fatal. Chapter 6, Famous Users and Their Stories. To list all the famous old Westerners who carried a Colt Navy would take an entire video, but let's hit some highlights. Wild Bill Hickok is probably the most famous Navy carrier. He favored a pair of ivory-grip Navies worn butt forward in a sash. These were the guns he used in his 1865 shootout with Dave Tutt in Springfield, Missouri, one of the few documented quick-draw duels in history. Hickok drew and shot Tutt through the heart at 75 yards with a percussion revolver. That's either incredible skill or incredible luck, and knowing Hickok, probably both. Confederate guerrilla fighters under William Quantrill and Bloody Bill Anderson carried multiple Navy revolvers. Cole Younger, who rode with Quantrill, and later the James Gang, carried Navies during the Civil War. These raiders understood that firepower meant carrying multiple guns, and the Navy's balance made it practical to carry 3 or 4 without being weighed down. Richard King, founder of the King Ranch in Texas, carried a Navy. John Wesley Hardin, one of the deadliest gunfighters in Old West history, started his career with Navy revolvers before switching to cartridge guns. Robert E. Lee was known to carry a Navy during the Civil War. Kit Carson had one. Buffalo Bill Cody carried one early in his career. There's a great story, probably apocryphal but worth telling, about a saloon gunfight in Virginia City, Nevada in 1863. 2 miners got into an argument over a claim. One pulled a knife, the other pulled a Navy. The man with the knife reportedly said, "That's not fair, I only got a blade." The man with the Navy supposedly replied, "Should have brought a gun then," and the knife wielder backed down. Whether that actually happened or not, it illustrates how the Navy had become synonymous with having the upper hand. During the Mexican-American conflicts, Texas Rangers made the Colt Navy their sidearm of choice. Rangers like John Coffey Hayes and Samuel Walker, before the Walker Colt even existed, used earlier Colt designs. but the Navy became the Ranger standard for years. The gun's reputation for reliability in the harsh Texas climate made it perfect for Ranger work. Chapter 7. Variations and caliber options. The standard Navy was 36 caliber, but Colt wasn't just stamping out identical copies for 22 years. They made variations and improvements as they went along, which is why collectors today can spend hours arguing about specific production details. The earliest models from 1851 through about 1853 had square-back trigger guards. If you see one of these, you're looking at a first-generation Navy, and that's pretty special. Later production switched to round trigger guards, which was supposedly more comfortable, though honestly I can't tell much difference. Serial numbers started at 1 in 1851 and ran all the way to about 215,000 by 1873, when they finally ceased production. This makes it relatively easy to date a Navy if you know the serial number ranges and what features correspond to which production periods. Collectors have charts and reference books dedicated to this stuff, and if you're into it, you can narrow down the manufacturing year sometimes to within a few months. Grip variations are another rabbit hole you can fall into. Early models had varnished walnut grips that looked nice when new, but wore pretty quickly with hard use. Later production switched to oil finish grips, which held up better to weather and handling. Some Navies had one-piece grips, others had two-piece grips. The brass grip frame was standard on civilian models, giving the gun that distinctive golden color on the backstrap and trigger guard. However, some military contracts specified iron grip frames for extra durability, since brass could bend or deform under hard use. These military iron frame Navies are pretty sought after by collectors today. Barrel lengths varied depending on what you needed the gun for. 7.5 inches was the standard military and civilian length, but 5-inch and 6-inch barrels were available from the factory. There are even some rare 4-inch barrels out there, though collectors debate whether these are factory originals or cut-down jobs done by gunsmiths in the field. Either way, the shorter barrels made the gun more concealable, which is why gamblers and businessmen tended to favor them. Finish options included the standard blued barrel and cylinder with case-hardened frame, which gave you that beautiful color case hardening on the metal. But if you had money to spend, you could get full nickel plating that resisted rust better and looked flashy as hell. Some Navies were engraved, ranging from simple border engraving around the cylinder and frame to full coverage with elaborate scrollwork and hunting scenes. Tiffany-style grips with mother-of-pearl or ivory could be special ordered, and these custom guns could cost double or triple the standard price. The London-made Navies are a whole category unto themselves. Starting in 1853, Colt opened a factory in London, England, to supply European markets and get around British import restrictions and tariffs. London-made Navies are identifiable by London proof marks stamped into the metal and address markings on the barrel that say Address Colonel Colt London. They're essentially identical to Hartford-made guns in terms of quality and function, but they're highly collectible today because fewer were made, and they've got that international history. There were also Richards and Mason conversion models where existing percussion Navies were converted to fire metallic cartridges, usually 38 caliber centerfire or 38 rimfire. These conversions happened both at Colt's factory and by gunsmiths in the field who wanted to extend the useful life of percussion guns. They kept the Navy relevant into the cartridge era. Chapter 8: Cultural Impact and Legacy. The Colt Navy. 1851 changed American firearms culture in ways that echoed for decades. It proved that a powerful handgun could be practical and portable. Before the Navy, handguns were either too big and heavy to carry comfortably, or too small and underpowered to be effective. The Navy hit the sweet spot. It also established Colt as the premier American firearms manufacturer. Yeah, Samuel Colt had success before the Navy, but this was the gun that sealed the deal. When people thought of a reliable revolver, they thought Colt, and that association lasted over a century. The Navy set design standards that influenced later revolvers. The grip angle, the cylinder length, the balance point. These elements appeared in later Colt designs, including the Peacemaker. When Colt's engineers sat down to design the single-action army in 1872, they had the Navy's success in mind. In literature and early popular culture, the Navy appears constantly. Dime novels of the 1860s and 70s frequently mention Colt Navies. Photographs from the Civil War era show everyone from generals to privates carrying them. Matthew Brady's famous photographs include numerous navies tucked into belts and holsters. The gun appears in early Western films too, though Hollywood often anachronistically puts navies in the hands of characters in the 1880s and 90s, after cartridge guns had taken over. Still, seeing a navy in a movie usually means someone did their historical homework. Collectors today prize original navies, especially ones with documented history. A standard navy in good condition might run $5,000 to $10,000. A navy with known provenance tied to a famous user or historical event? Sky's the limit. Some have sold at auction for over $100,000. Chapter 9. Finding one today. Worry das Trade. So you want a Colt Navy of your own? Well, you've got options. Original antique navies are out there, but expect to pay serious money for one in firing condition. Most affordable originals are non-firing wall hangers with missing parts or pitted bores. Still beautiful pieces of history, just not shootable. The good news is that several manufacturers make quality reproductions. Uberti in Italy makes excellent Navy replicas that are actually safe to shoot with proper black powder loads. Pieta also makes them. These reproductions run from $300 to $600, depending on finish and features. You can buy a replica Navy, take it to the range, and experience what it was like to shoot the same gun Wild Bill Hickok carried. If you get into cowboy action shooting, the Navy is legal for the black powder categories. Some hardcore shooters actually prefer the Navy over later cartridge guns because of that balance and pointability we talked about. The recoil's manageable, the accuracy is there, and you get style points for authenticity. Loading and shooting a percussion revolver is a skill worth learning if you're interested in firearms history. It connects you to how shooters actually operated in the 1850s and 60s. The smell of black powder smoke, the process of capping each cylinder, the ritual of loading, it's all part of the experience. Just remember that black powder is corrosive as hell. You need to clean your Navy thoroughly after shooting, or the bore will rust. Hot soapy water works best for cleaning black powder residue. Modern gun cleaners don't cut it. This is one area where old-fashioned methods still reign supreme. Well folks, that's it for the Colt Navy 1851 and the 6 truths about why it terrified early gunfighters. This wasn't just another revolver. This was the gun that changed how men fought on the frontier, that proved a handgun could be powerful and practical, and that established standards we still see in firearms today. From Wild Bill to Confederate cavalrymen to Texas Rangers to miners in California, the Navy was there, reliable and deadly. Now there's a lot more to say about this revolver, but we'd be here all day.